Well, welcome and thank you for joining me tonight on the podcast Tips with Rob Greenlee show. Thank you so much for spending your hour or so of your evening tonight with me on the show as I'm back with another episode of the show. This is episode 25 of the series. So I'm making it almost a half a year here of doing this show every week. And the topic this week is quick and dirty podcasting tips with grammar girl Mignon Fogarty, who is also a podcast Hall of Famer. So she was inducted into the Podcast Hall of Fame here back in 2016. And we're going to talk to her a little bit about her kind of convergence strategy that I think of audio and video in her content productions. And I think she's right on the money with what the market is looking for. And she's always been very attuned to the latest trends. I mean, she started out in the short form audio side, which had its unique niche that she built a whole network around. So I'm excited to have Mignon on the show to kind of share her insights with you. And also, I wanted to mention too tonight that StreamYard has a little bit of news that I wanted to share with everybody. They have been acquired, and I wanted to congratulate the company. It's Bending Spoons out of Milan, Italy, who has officially agreed to acquire StreamYard, the leader in live streaming and video recording solutions. And I guess they've been big fans of StreamYard and the work that the team has done to build this amazing platform that all of you support if you happen to be a StreamYard user, and really are excited to accelerate the platform forward in the future as part of their team out of Italy. So everybody, these two teams are kind of blending together and working together, and I'm part of their organization now to some degree as being a content creator on the StreamYard channel. So I'm excited to be here. But I wanted to mention too that we are going to have a giveaway at the end of the show again for a Puddles duck and a Puddles mug of sorts, or a StreamYard mug. And so I also want to mention too, toward the end of the show, we will get into answering your questions. So if you have a question about StreamYard or any of the topics that Mignon and I talk about, because she's going to stay with me to help answer your questions that you might have. And she's a wealth of information and has been doing this for a very long time as well. So let's go ahead and move on. And I didn't pull up on the screen here what the Bending Spoons website looks like, but I wanted to share that with everybody. So if you wanted to go check it out, you're certainly welcome to do that. So let me pull up the URL to that, and then I will share what their website looks like up on the screen here. And you can kind of check it out and see for yourself. It's very cool and very kind of StreamYard-ish in a way, and it's kind of modern design and trend. And it has a terrific team with lots of apps that they actually currently already own. So it's going to be an interesting blend of this platform that this company operates, and StreamYard will be a part of it. So as you can see, it's kind of it's a fun company. And so if you want to go check it out, that'd be great. So let's go ahead and move on and bring Mignon up to the stage. I'm excited to bring her up. And Mignon, how are you?
I'm good. Hi, Rob. It's so great to see you.
It's great to see you too. I know it's been a couple of years, but it's always great to connect up with you and hear what's new with you, because you've always kind of been at the vanguard of podcasting. I mean, I have to say, from the very early days of being involved in short form content, which was a little bit breaking the norm in the early days. And so whatever you say really kind of resonates with me. And I think you're right on the ball with what you're doing with podcasting right now. So let me drop down this banner up at the top here, and let's see here. I need to take that down, but I wanted to put up your your particular website for your podcast, you
Yeah.
do the Grammar Girl podcast. And so you've been doing that for how many years now? Have you been
We're
doing the
coming
Grammar
up
Girl?
on 18 years.
18 years.
Hard to believe.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about that podcast and kind of the format of it and what you do in it. And I think you've become really kind of almost a household name from the standpoint of being a person that helps people understand grammar and English and language. So,
Thanks.
so tell us a
Yeah,
bit about the show and what you're doing.
well, philosophically, it's important to me to help people who wanna write better. Like, that's what I do. I love language. I love all the fascinating tidbits about the history of language and the editing quirks, and I'm there to help people who want to learn more about language, whether it's the history, the nitpicky rules, all that. So and I love it. So, and I started so long ago now when I was a working editor. I was a technical editor, and I've always loved gadgets and technology. And I heard about this new thing called podcasting, and wanted to give it a try. And after a couple of false starts, I realized that my editing clients were making the same mistakes over and over again, and yet they didn't want to go read a textbook or even a book necessarily. I mean, now people read books, but my books, but in the beginning I thought, what's a fun quick way I can convey how to use a semicolon, the difference between that versus which, affect versus effect. And I I wanted to do a short scripted podcast so it would be quick. And when I was growing up, my mom would always talk about doing a quick and dirty tip, a quick and dirty job on things. She'd say, "Let's do a quick and dirty job on these dishes tonight." To me, it was just the sort of the minimal viable project. And so, I when I started, it was Grammar Girls quick and dirty tips for better writing. And it was in the beginning, it was like 3 to 5 minutes, and it was just about one topic.
Mhm.
It was one of those things. And so it took off beyond my wildest dreams. So it was, number one at back then, iTunes, now Apple Podcast. It just, rocketed up the charts. I still am not sure why. It was all just word of mouth. But it was amazing. And then because my background was in startups in Silicon Valley, I knew when you have an audience, you have a business. And so, and podcasting was so early then, it wasn't clear what the business would be, but it was clear there was something. And so I started the Quick and Dirty Tips podcast network to start other shows that use the same format, because I thought that short, one quick tip, one useful tip was really what made the show popular. And you can do that, on a bunch of different topics. We had the Modern Manners Guy with manners tips. We had Legal Lad with legal tips, the Mighty Mommy with parenting tips, Nutrition Diva with nutrition tips, that you can do quick tips about a lot of different topics. And so, I built the network up to, I think it was 6 shows
Mhm.
when I partnered with Macmillan to grow it even more.
Yeah, I think you were kind of an early pioneer of the short form content genre, and I know I followed your Macmillan deal and your podcast network for many years, and it was astonishing the level of success that you got because I mean let's be honest, the podcasting medium is kind of known for typically longer form content, but you were able to carve out an interest niche that really made that opportunity unfold for you, and I think everybody wants to be a better English speaker, English writer, not misspell things. Everybody aspires to that. So if they can get tips and help with that, I think especially when they're free, because
Mhm.
it was a free podcast, right?
Oh,
So
yeah, still
I
is.
think that's
And
powerful, right?
yeah, and one of the things I love about podcasting is that it allows so many different things. If you enjoy a long show with 4 people talking, you can get that. If you enjoy a short show with one scripted tip, you can get that, and you can make it. And whatever you wanna make, there's a really good chance you're gonna find an audience for it. And it's just finding that match between what you wanna make and the people who wanna listen to it.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's kind of it's really something that podcasters really need to think about is, I mean, what needs do people have? And in some ways it's a psychological game too, right? I mean, you're trying to cater to people's needs, interests, and passions. And I think you've done that, but you also do it with a certain amount of flair. And it did help that you were able to get on like the Oprah Winfrey show at one point and get
Yeah,
a little exposure too. That
that
helped.
was stunning. It came about, yeah, I was on the Oprah Winfrey Show because someone wrote into Oprah criticizing her grammar, actually. And the producer, I know, can you imagine? The producer of the show, her sister was a fan of my podcast. Her sister actually lived in China and was listening to podcasts in English because she missed hearing the English language. And so when the producer told her sister she had this topic she wanted to cover, they wanted to bring someone in to defend Oprah essentially. Her sister said, "Oh, you have to get Grammar Girl. She's one of my favorite podcasters." And I think someone else on the team, the Oprah team, also listened to the podcast. So, two people on the team were fans, and I don't even know how they got my phone number, but they called me and wanted me to come on. It was amazing. And it's funny, people often ask if I thought it was a joke or something like that. And I didn't, because I had already been approached by Martha Stewart to be on her show, and that actually didn't work out. They saw my demo reel and actually didn't want me. I had
Oh,
never done any TV before, any video at all. I didn't even know what it meant to put together a demo reel. But that was why I actually believed that it was Oprah when they called.
yeah, and I think that there's a little bit of lesson to learn from that too, is that I think if you're a podcaster and you're in a genre that has an interest group out there that you think is pretty strong, trying to get on other types of media can really propel you as an expert and a leader in that area. And you were obviously a leader in English language of sorts because you've been honing your skills. I mean, I, do you have an English background yourself as far as educational wise too?
I do. My undergraduate degree is in English. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that
Making my
means that
alma
you've got
mater
all the
proud.
credentials, right?
Right. I actually have a master's in biology, which is a strange little
Yeah, I
diversion, but
think I
I
remember
am
that.
a credentialed English major.
So are you ever going to do a podcast about that topic, biology at all, or
Well,
have you?
actually, when I said I had some false starts, my first podcast actually was a science podcast. It was called
Uh,
Absolute Science, and I think I think I did about 20 episodes. I did that with a friend who I worked with at a biotech type company, and we did that together. So that was a lot of fun, but it was also a lot of work putting together. I mean, especially way back then, the technology. There was no StreamYard back then. I went to Radio Shack and I got this weird recorder that I hooked up to my phone. It was very clunky, and so I had my co-host Adam Lowe and me, and then we were dialing in people, scientists, to interview. And I was, at the time, I was a freelance science and technology writer, and I was spending 20 hours a week putting together the show, and it wasn't making any money. And it was, when you're a freelancer, time really is money. And so I
yeah.
couldn't keep doing it. But by then I had fallen in love with podcasting and wanted to keep at it. So that was when I started thinking, well, what can I talk about, and what could I do more quickly, and how could I do it more quickly? And that's where I came up with, okay, it's just me. I'm not trying to dial anyone in on the rotary phone, essentially. And it's scripted, so there's not a lot of editing, so and it's short. So
Yeah.
that was sort of how it came to be.
So here, let me add to the stage a little screenshot of the podcast and your artwork that's on there too. This is at the Quick and Dirty Tips Network website. Uh,
Mhm.
so if you happen to go to Apple Podcasts or frankly, even YouTube, and I'll pull up your YouTube page too, this is the artwork that's there, so you can recognize Mignon's podcast. So you can see lots of episodes in here going back many, many years. And I'm sure, so do you ever kind of revisit topics around various specific topics
I
as
do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because
You know,
meanings in the culture change, don't they?
yes, yeah. So we're coming up on episode, I think it's 980. I think 979 is out today. It's a lot. And so one, it's amazing how many new topics there still are to cover, but a lot of things need to be covered every, 4 or 5 years. So if it's been I usually don't do the same topic until it's been 4 or 5 years, but then, I think I've done semicolons a couple of times now and things like that. The big topics that, new listeners are gonna wanna hear and people who've been listening since the beginning, it'll be so old that they won't feel like it's repetitive, and I rarely, I think maybe only twice when I had an emergency have I run just a straight rerun. I always update the show, and, I'm always looking for news hooks. There was recently, Taylor Swift had the, Tortured Poets Department, I think is gonna be her new album, and there was a controversy about the apostrophe in the title, and so when I saw that, I said, "Oh, I have an old episode about the apostrophe, and I can bring this up, and I can talk about it using this new pop culture hook that will make it fun and exciting for people new and old to hear about." So, I do that a lot now.
So what other, type of English language things have you seen kind of become a little quirky or different over the years that you've been faced with? I'm sure you get a lot of questions about, language structure and uses of grammar out there. Is there some unusual stories beyond just what you just gave us,
Right, like, you mean like what
that
has
you've come
changed in
across?
language over time?
Well, change and also just kind of quirky, things about the language that people are
Oh,
typically,
yeah.
flustered with.
Yeah. I mean, I
Yeah,
love all the quirky language stories. So,
yeah.
one that comes up a lot, or not a lot, but has come up, is that kids will say, they're versing someone in sports, for example. They'll say like, "Oh, mom, our team is versing, you know, Springbrook Elementary today, in soccer," a lot of parents ask me, "Why is my kid saying versing instead of playing? Like, what is going on there?" And it's pretty widespread now, but I've been hearing about it for, I don't know, maybe 10 or 12 years, and it sort of pops up. There'll be I don't know, like Slate or someone will have an article about it, and then people will ask about it again, and they think it comes from, video gaming.
Mm.
So I think if I remember right, it's been a while since I've covered it now, but I think there was a video game where when you entered it, it said, you know, you're versing some other player, and a lot of kids picked that up and brought it into real life. So it's older than you'd think too. I think it's, if I remember right, it's probably like 30 years old now, that you can find instances of it if you search hard online. So it's not as new as people think, but it probably does come from video gaming, and it's pretty widespread now.
Yeah, it sounds like it. So I wanted to mention that if you wanted to enter the giveaway at the end of the show, just type into the comment field of the listening or the viewing platform that you're watching, hashtag the yard, and that'll automatically get you entered into the giveaway. Because StreamYard has a giveaway tool that we use in every episode to give away some StreamYard merchandise, like I showed you at the beginning, the Puddles duck, as well as a mug. So when you get a chance, along with your comments, just go ahead and type in hashtag the yard into the comment field. So I would imagine, Mignon, that there's like cultural changes and words that are used that are completely new. I mean, how do you handle that? I mean, English, I would think, and you primarily just focus on English, right? It's not like you're
Yeah.
trying to cover other languages.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, how is the language evolving and changing with the new generation? So you look at Gen Z or you look at some of these younger generations, isn't there a tendency to try and create new language? And kind of secondary to that, how do you think that impacts a medium like a podcasting?
Yeah. Well, I mean, language is always changing, and every generation thinks the generation younger than them is making up words that aren't quite right. And it's really funny. If you go back, you can go back to newspapers, 100 years ago, and you'll find people saying, "Kids today, they don't know how to write," you know. So
Yeah.
it's actually hilarious. But yeah, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is exclamation point, like punctuation. Like, yeah, I think younger people, I'm not sure if it's Gen Z or millennials, I forget, but they view periods as hostile in text messaging. Like if you write a sentence and you put a period at the end of it in text messaging, it's viewed as they start worrying like, "Oh my gosh, is she angry with me? Like why is there a period here? What's going
Really,
on?"
a
Like
period at the end? Well, I didn't even realize that. So,
absolutely. And
good
then
to know.
yeah, and I interview a lot of linguists now and have linguists write for me because their take on language is so interesting. And a linguist told me that in text messaging, it's clear that when you send the message, it's done. So in a sense, hitting send is the period. And so if you put a period there, the younger readers view it as having some sort of meaning, that there has to be meaning associated with it because you bothered to put it in because you already terminated your message by just hitting send. And I thought that was such an interesting perspective. And then the other thing is, younger people also use far more exclamation points than older people. So, when I was getting my degree in English, there was the thing, okay, you have one exclamation point to use in your entire writing life. So use it carefully,
Right,
and
right.
now I'm just like everyone else where I'm writing email messages and putting in, an exclamation point after every sentence and then going back and taking out half of them so I don't look manic, like I don't look so overly enthusiastic that like what are
Yeah.
all the, so but again, because I think it's good in writing email and text messages and things like that to pay attention to the messages that come from beyond the words. We don't have the clues like seeing someone's face that they're smiling or laughing or frowning and scowling.
Mhm.
We need those markers to help convey the tone markers. And so I don't see anything wrong with including, a lot of exclamation points in an email message to let people know, because if you say, looking forward to seeing you tonight, period, a lot of people are going to be like, oh my gosh, is she really? I'm not sure. Like,
Right, right. Well, that and the invasion that we've seen over the last couple of years, especially as we've seen AI grow, of emojis and how that communicates another level of communication beyond the English language. Yeah, it's
it
interesting.
absolutely cracks me up how ChatGPT wants to use so many emojis. It's just like, calm down, ChatGPT.
Well,
But speaking
he's
of
trying to
emo
be hip. He's trying, ChatGPT, I guess I can't really call it him or her. I should not gender ChatGPT, should I? But,
I don't know. It reminded me of another fun language story. People study linguists study emoji, which is a fun job, and they found that older people are more likely to put noses in their smiley faces than younger people. And I completely noticed that I did that. I'll do the colon dash parenthesis.
yeah.
I used to for a smiley, but the younger people, I'll leave out the nose. So I started leaving out the nose so I would look more hip.
I don't think I if I ever send a smiley face, I don't think I ever use one with the nose in it. I don't know why. I don't know why. It's like,
You were born cooler than I was.
yeah, it's like the next generation thinks that somehow we need to be noseless or something. I don't know.
Well, it's just
Maybe it's
fewer
not.
keystrokes, it's more efficient. And
Oh,
I
oh,
mean,
I
in
see what you're
language,
saying.
language generally does trend toward the more efficient. If you go back and look at texts from, manuscripts, documents from the 1800s, they have far, far more commas than we do today. They are just putting commas everywhere. Every 3 words, there's a
Right,
comma.
right.
So, it does trend toward fewer and fewer, more, simpler and simpler language.
Yeah, and didn't we go through a phase too where people were texting each other without, proper capitalization? It was all lowercase. It was missing all grammar, right? It was just
Oh,
raw type,
yeah.
right?
Well, you because of the keyboards and early
Right.
phones, the keyboards were so hard to use. You had to, tap 3 times to get certain letters, so people used a lot more abbreviations. So that was sort of early text messaging, had lots and lots of abbreviations like L8 for late and stuff like that. I think today, because it's so much easier to type on the phone keyboard or even use voice to text, I actually feel like that those abbreviations, those efficiencies have more gone away. Like I don't see them as much as I used to. I'm not a huge texter, and I'm not a huge texter with 16-year-olds. So I'm not certain what they're doing. But in my
Yeah.
world, I see fewer abbreviations in texts than I used to.
Yeah, and all caps was always seen in my generation as almost like an attack. Is
Hmm.
that true that that's still the case?
Yeah, I believe they're still generally viewed as shouting when you write in all caps.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
So as you think about these things when it comes to like podcasting, where do you see it kind of converging? I mean, obviously, text is a big part of podcasting from a show notes perspective and a
Mhm.
titling and things like that. But I mean, how do you use the English language that maybe you might consider to be unique when it comes to podcasting?
Hmm. Well, the way that for me, that it's different from writing, in writing, you are generally advised to limit your use of adverbs.
Hmm.
So, really, very, extremely, those words, when you're writing them, they look kind of juvenile and wordy. But the way we talk, we all use adverbs when we talk. So, I'm saying, it's so great to see you today, Rob. Well, I'm really glad to be here.
Right.
Those are adverbs, and you're
Hmm.
not going to sound natural if you don't use them. So, that to me is the biggest difference between writing and speaking in the podcast.
Yeah, this blend of kind of trying to find emotion. It's expressed differently, right? And between the written word and the spoken word, and that's what's great about video. And we should probably transition this conversation into talking about your kind of shift into
Mhm,
more video, and also shifting into longer form content and interviews and
mhm.
things like that, which in the early days of what you were doing, you really didn't do a lot of that. So what what was the trigger, and when did you make this realization that maybe you need to get into longer form content as well as doing some interviews, conversations? What were you feeling the market needed by pursuing that?
Yeah. It's funny now that you mentioned, I don't remember the first interview I did. I have been doing interviews in the Grammar Girl podcast occasionally for
Hmm.
many years. So
Okay.
I might have done one every 6 months or every 3 months. But I'm excited because we just today started releasing a second weekly Grammar Girl episode, and that second episode every week is going to be an interview. And over the years, have I have a spreadsheet where I have 80 people listed in the spreadsheet that I think would be just delightful to talk to, that they're doing
Mhm.
fascinating work that I would love to hear about, and I know the audience would too. And I think that with the new technology, it's become a lot easier to do interviews, with so many platforms where you can talk to someone and easily record. And, since the pandemic, everyone is more comfortable doing video calls and Zooming and recording themselves. And so that makes the guests, it's much easier to get the guests up to speed to do what you need them to do. And
Mhm.
then, as there's been all this talk in the podcasting world for years and years now about doing podcasters doing video and that being a way to expand your audience. And we've been playing around with video for years on my YouTube channel. Gosh, when Libsyn started letting you just, automatically put your show up with a slide, we did that many years ago. And then we for a while, it was actually right before the pandemic, I was starting to do video where I would record myself reading the scripted podcast episode. And that's kind of funny, actually. So for years, Todd was telling me I should do video. Todd Cochran, yeah, I know he's a great friend of yours in mine, and I kept saying, Todd, nobody wants to watch me read my script, and he was always like, yes, Mignon, they do. You'd be amazed, they do. And so I had finally listened to him and started giving that a try. And then actually then the pandemic hit and I had to move and I didn't have my video set up anymore, and it was just very
Mhm.
chaotic, as so many people experience. So we sort of stopped that for a while. But then, then the other thing about my show is that there's a lot, it's about the language. And so it really, in some ways, is easier if you can see where I'm putting a semicolon when I'm talking about how to use semicolons, and I'm reading
Mhm.
example sentences. And it really helps, I think, to see those. And so for quite a while, maybe even a year, I recorded the show, and then I did an enormous amount of video production work, putting slides over the whole thing with all the example sentences and stock art and things that made it visually interesting. And I was really, really proud of those videos. I think I did a great job, and I thought they were great, but they really just did not get the amount of traffic that could in any way justify the amount of work I was putting into them.
Yeah.
And I was to the point where I was almost like, please, somebody make me stop, like, because every week I'd be like, I'll just do one more. And then, at some point, I had a strategy meeting with Macmillan, and we all agreed that it wasn't a good use of my time. And
Oh,
so then we went back to putting cover slides, which you can kind of see up there now on the screen.
yeah.
And, really, we did not take much of a traffic hit at all by going from the fully produced video to the cover slides. So, right, I shouldn't have been doing all that work. And then, I'm not exactly sure how the conversation started about doing the interview show, but it was something I've kind of always wanted to do. And I've been making LinkedIn learning courses for a couple of years, maybe even
Mhm.
longer, 3 maybe years. And, that took all of my extra time. And so now I have 7 LinkedIn learning courses, and I think that's all I'm going to do. They're sort of done. It was this huge project. And so now I have this time to do this other thing I've wanted to do, which is the interview shows. And what's so great is we can put them up on YouTube. And so we're doing the whole podcaster to YouTube thing because now we have video that is more interesting than sort of what I was doing before. And I think that, 2 people talking is more of a native YouTube
Yeah.
thing. You're not trying to force your podcast into this thing that isn't quite right for you, where the cover slide, I feel, is kind of like that, or even the produced videos, at the level of which I could do them, not fully animated or anything. It's not like a native YouTube thing.
Though I would say that you've got, oops, I was gonna put us both up. It does look like you have a good following on your YouTube channel. So it's just a matter, I have that going with my channel too, to some degree, where I have a lot of older videos that do really well. And then I'm creating new ones, and those are kind of picking up momentum over time. And I think that's the takeaway that I take from this, is that I think you have to have a little bit of patience with the videos too, because sometimes they gather momentum over time,
Yeah.
and kind of start growing your channel and becoming more influential over a period of time. Um, but it does seem like, if you're already producing, and kind of like this show, I think we're both kind of doing a similar strategy where we're producing the show. We might as well do it. If it's an interview program, we might as well do it on a video platform and kind of put some effort into making it look good, and having a good conversation, and then being able to repurpose that content into an audio podcast and into a YouTube channel. Or if you want to invest in doing a video podcast, or you want to put it up. I mean, did you guys explore putting it up on like a Spotify or do anything like that as well? Because they take videos too now.
Yeah, no, we haven't really looked into that yet, but it's something we should definitely consider. And then, you talked about short form. We're cutting up the long videos, taking clips of those and putting them up on social to promote the show, which, is a nice way to promote it. It's nicer than I think it's going to be a mix. I mean, we're going to do static images and clips from the the show. So
Mhm.
it's nice to have all those assets for promotion. And it's nice to have the guests to help you promote the show. That's something that I've never really had. That, if someone has an interview show, you interview someone, and then presumably at least some of those guests will tell their followers to go watch your show. And then presumably some of those people will enjoy it and come back. And, we never had that growth opportunity before because I didn't have guests. So, it'll be really interesting to
Yeah.
see if having regular guests helps the show grow too.
Because you haven't really had guests for that long, right? I mean, how many episodes have you done with guests that were on YouTube, and then also in your podcast? So it's pretty new, right?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I've been doing like every 4 to 6 months in the past, I might do one.
Hmm.
But this whole weekly thing, this is the first week. So
Oh God! Wow. Okay. Well, that was good timing for me to have you on then.
yes. Yeah, but
It's
I have
purely
been doing
coincidental.
them. I have been
Yeah.
doing them maybe like once a month for the last
Okay.
you
Got it.
know, 6 months maybe. Um
So let's talk about your interviews a little bit. I mean, what's the topics that you like to drill in, and who is typically your guest? Obviously, it's an English expert of some at some level, but what's the spectrum
Yeah.
of that?
It's funny, the team was trying to pin that down, to describe it, and they were like, "We can't just say people Mignon likes."
That's
People
all right. I
Mignon.
say it's podcast tips with Rob Greenlee and friends. So that's kind of what it is for this show. So I
Yeah,
can
so, I
totally
mean,
understand that.
the
Yeah.
people we have lined up, a lot of them are people who have books out. So, today's is, Charles Duhigg, who's the author of Super Communicators, which is
Yeah.
obviously about communication. And, and also I'm lucky in that, his publicist pitched us on being a guest. So that has
Okay.
happened in the past. The guy who does, XKCD, his publicist pitched me a while ago, and he was on the show. That was really fun. And yeah, so I've had some big author guests in the past because they've pitched us. And and then who's next? So I have Hannah Vidine, who's a medievalist who wrote a book about the names for animals in Old English, the Deo horde. And just talking about Old English words for animals, and did you know that the whale was considered to be an evil animal? And what is going on with that? It's just fascinating. um, I'm talking to a linguist who is working on the team developing a dictionary of African American English for Oxford English Dictionary. So in
Hmm.
partner with Oxford, they're making this new dictionary that highlights, documents African American English, and everything that goes into that, and the challenges with getting historical records, to document the words that are part of that language. So that's really fascinating. Who else? Who else? Oh, I talked to Eli Bernstein, who has a book out, The Dictionary of Fine Distinctions, which is about the subtle differences between words. I'm trying to think of an example. Like, he had, what is the difference between a latte and a cappuccino? And they're just these words where there are, a broth versus a stock,
Right.
when you're cooking. So, just all these words where the meaning is so close, but there's a fine distinction. And so that was a fascinating interview. Actually, what I'm realizing, what's really funny, if you probably don't know about me, but I'm very ahead. We decided we weren't going to launch until I had at least 4 episodes recorded and done.
Hmm.
And usually I'm putting my show out like 2 days ahead of time. I'm never ever ahead. So the fact that I can tell you what's coming up is completely new for me.
Yeah. It's funny. I mean, you talk about coffee, and I've been going to Starbucks for a long time, and this is a little bit of a story, and probably
Seattleite.
others will be able to associate with this. But the terms that Starbucks uses to describe their different sizes of their cups, right? It's always been one of those fascinating things to think about. And a person actually did a little research on this. So you have like this tall, and you have a grande, and then you have um, those are the only two that I can remember off the top of my head, but
Venti?
those two. What's that? Oh, a
Venti?
venti, right.
Yeah.
And what this researcher did, and it's something that any one of us can do, is they actually poured, the contents of, like, 2 or 3 of those different sizes of cups, and they all, filled a 12-ounce cup. So so what Starbucks has done is they've made the diameter of each of those cups different, so they look like they're taller, but they contain the same amount of coffee.
No.
Yeah.
That's crushing.
So that
So
has
you should
nothing
get
to
the
do with
grande
podcasting.
because it's the cheapest.
Right, well, and it's like, but isn't the tall smaller than the grande?
Oh,
I
I don't
thought
know.
is taller but bigger than, like, I don't know. It's so confusing. But I know every time I order a tall, latte, the cup is like this squatty little thing.
Yeah. I
So it should.
recently I recently gave up caffeine and
uh,
we walked by a Starbucks a couple of days ago and
yeah.
I was like, I can think of nothing but coffee. There it is. I want it.
So so as you think about your career, focusing on helping people with their grammar and stuff, what is the probably a couple of the biggest things that people stumble with when it comes to the English language? I'm sure that you get just bombarded by similar questions over and over again. What are the biggest ones that people struggle with? You think around grammar?
Yeah, I mean, there are commonly confused words, so that's a huge category,
Yeah,
was a chapter, in all my books. So,
yeah,
affect versus effect is one of the biggest things, people get confused about. In fact, I think that people speculate that the reason the word impact, to say, something had an impact on something else, the reason that has become so popular is because people don't know whether to use affect or effect with an A or an E. Um, the tip is that affect with an A is a verb. Usually, there are some exceptions, but
right.
usually with a verb, effect with an E is usually a noun. And you can remember that by thinking of a big black raven. And because raven is spelled Raven and Aven stands for affect verb, effect noun. Um, a funny story, like when I went on Oprah, that was one of the tips I gave, but I forgot. I was so nervous. I forgot to say there were exceptions, and I got hate mail. Someone wrote to me and said, "Thanks for confusing the entire country." Oh
Oh,
my gosh.
wow. That's quite a burden to put on you.
Yeah. So, yeah, there are exceptions, but I will say that with fear probably for the rest of my life. Um, But yeah, but
So
then one thing and a bigger
yeah.
picture tip that I have, so that's like the mechanics sort of tip, but sort of
Mhm.
a bigger picture writing tip is when you're using effect or impact, could you use a more specific word? Often it's very vague. So if you're saying, the rain affected fourth quarter sales, it would be better and more clear to say either the rain depressed fourth quarter sales or the rain helped fourth quarter sales. You're
Yeah.
giving more information. It's more clear. So, if you're struggling with affect or effect, maybe or impact, maybe think about what's a more specific word I could use.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And there's folks that are intrigued by this conversation, and they're already posting, kind of funny, similar words. And English has a lot of, similar sounding words that mean different things, and it's a pretty confusing thing. Oftentimes,
Absolutely.
it just depends on how they're used, right? So,
Right. And we have more words, more synonyms than a lot of other languages because we have imported so many words from other languages. So we often have two words for things, and one will be of a Germanic origin and one will be of a Latin or French origin because we take words from all these different languages and blend
mhm,
them together to make English. So, you know, cure and heal are, two synonyms for almost mean the same thing, and
mhm.
one comes from Latin and one comes from German, and we have a lot of words like that that also, people people can wonder which one to use.
Yeah. And I also read that you are really oftentimes very focused on language that is considered to be approachable, and how you use language to be, I don't know. I mean, so when you use the word
Yeah.
approachable, I'm assuming that you're meaning, friendly or welcoming type of words, and then that you really love the word kerfuffle.
I
Why
do
is
love the
that?
word kerfuffle.
Why
Doesn't
is
it
that?
sound like what it is? I mean, a kerfuffle is a dust up, a conflict, but not a serious conflict. It's sort of it's not, if you have a kerfuffle, you're not getting in a knife fight or something. It's just sort of a spat. And so, I think a kerfuffle it makes me think of chickens, like kind of
It
going
sounds
at each
very
other,
English,
feathers
Mignon.
flying and maybe a little bit of dust coming up, a kerfuffle. But yeah, using simple, approachable language has been something that has been my perspective since the beginning. That's one of the reasons. And being approachable, when you showed the logo before, I put a lot of thought into that Grammar Girl was a cartoon character and the color was orange because I wanted it to be friendly and approachable, because grammar is such an intimidating topic for people. I don't think the school marm, concept is going to help people learn. People don't learn when they're frightened. They don't learn when they're being made to feel stupid or inferior. They learn when they feel supported and they're having fun. And so that was what I wanted to convey with the branding for Grammar Girl, everything from the name to the cartoon character to the color. But then, recently, I was talking about my LinkedIn learning courses, and the last course I did, the one that just came out, is writing with plain English. And this is a whole thing that is mandated by the US government. If you write for the US government, you're supposed to use plain language. And it's a specific type of writing. And learning more about all the rules and guidelines for writing with plain language was really transformative for my own writing. It makes your work more approachable and more easily understandable. And a lot of people, there's a misconception that writing with plain language is dumbing down the language, and that it will make people think you are not as smart if you're using this simple language. But studies have shown that, actually, readers will actually think that you're smarter when you use plain language because they can understand what you say,
Yeah, right.
because it's clear. So, yeah, I mean, I'm so proud of that course. If you want to try one of my LinkedIn learning courses, start with writing with plain English, because I thought it was so great. I'm just really excited about those concepts.
So, Dorothy brings up an interesting comment that said, your comments are very helpful here in this episode, and Mignon sounds like a human Grammarly, and that definitely brings up an interesting little twist to our topic here. Is that increasingly people are using these AI tools like Grammarly and AI, OpenAI's ChatGPT, to create English. And I don't know if you found this too, but if you generate English in like ChatGPT and you use it and you happen to have Grammarly installed,
Mm.
and it'll analyze the ChatGPT text that's generated, and frankly, it'll tear it apart, which means to me that there's a conflict and disagreement around the use of language between these different algorithms that are linked up with artificial intelligence. And so, are you increasingly seeing discussions that are sourcing out of whether or not we should believe the language that's coming out of these large language models, and that they're maybe not grammatically always correct?
That is fascinating. I had not seen that about Grammarly chopping up ChatGPT. Honestly, Grammarly is not that great a tool. I tried it again maybe 6 months ago, and I was shocked at the things that flagged that were not errors, or, I was really, I felt like it was actually worse than the last time I tried it. Um, I've been reading, so between the two of them, I would actually put more faith in ChatGPT than Grammarly. Um, People might be surprised to hear that, but Yeah, I've been reading extensively about AI. I actually started an AI newsletter called AI Side Quest for writers and editors who are interested in it. I haven't been able to keep up with it very well. I had some family issues, and it's sort of because it's a side quest.
Hmm.
When main things come up, sometimes you have to drop your side quests. But I hope to continue to publish that in the future. But yeah, I've been reading just extensively about AI for at least a year. And before that, I was aware of it. I have all sorts of thoughts about AI. Because it does spit out, you know, I would say grammatically correct writing nearly all the time. I think that I'm worried that, for my business, that people aren't going to need as often to look up how to use a semicolon, how to know the difference between affect or effect. Because if you're having ChatGPT spit out, your social media posts or your blog posts or whatever you're using it for, it really doesn't need a lot of that kind of basic cleanup anymore, which is the kind of thing that would bring people to my website. So,
Yeah.
that is a concern. Um, but I think especially for people who speak English as a second language and sometimes struggle to get their points across or have to work so much harder, to present their ideas, I think it's amazing for them. That suddenly they can be evaluated for their ideas instead of the mechanics of their writing. I've heard college professors say that, there's a business professor I heard say, he no longer accepts bad writing. He expects all his students to put their stuff through ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini and fix it up before they turn it in. That he has higher expectations now for his students' writing than he did before.
Yeah. So as I think about it, maybe this area of discussion might be a good topic area for it, because I do think, and we've seen it in the comments here already, that people are noticing that even Microsoft Copilot and Grammarly are conflicting with each other, and these platforms are conflicting. And it does raise the bigger question: is that we have to feel confident that what these automatic text management tools are, AI tools, are doing the right thing. And how do we always know that, right? And it gets back to our individual skills, right? And our knowledge of the English language as well. And I know I find myself editing Chat GPT as well as Grammarly all the time. It wants to make changes to the text that I don't always agree with.
Mhm.
And it's not so much grammar that I conflict with. It's more to do with the actual language itself and what words it's using to describe things. Sometimes it's just completely wrong for what I'm
Yeah.
trying to communicate. Right.
Yeah, yeah. No, I've had it spit out things that were just completely wrong. And I don't use it for writing. I don't find it useful
Hmm.
for writing, like my show or blog posts. Like
Yeah.
no, absolutely not. I mean, but I use it to write alt text for my images. It's much faster for that. I used it to write the first draft of my show description.
Hmm.
And again, I edit it, I fix it, but it's faster to do that. It's for I find for those small bits of information, it's quite good, but not for whole, and maybe for a simpler kind of post or for someone, I have a very high quality standards, for my show and my writing and my work. But, for someone, I understand for someone who is doing a different kind of work and just needs to put out, 2 blog posts a day or something that is just meant to attract SEO to their site or something like that. I can see why people would use it. It's probably good enough for that kind of thing. Another big concern I have is just the world being flooded with mediocre content and, finding it harder to rise above that and be discovered when there's just so much more content f- j- flooding people all the time, and and people might not be sure how to even find the quality content anymore. I do feel like people who are already established, like I feel like I have some sort of, I feel like I have some sort of credibility in the world
Right.
as someone who provides quality information about writing. So I hope that when people are looking for information, they still, when they're seeing 50 sites or articles that are about the same topic, that maybe they'll say, oh, that grammar girl, I remember her and I know her stuff will be good. But I think especially for new people starting out, it's going to be really hard to break through just the flood of content that is coming out in the world right now.
Yeah, and being able to determine what's good and what isn't good really at this point is still a human decision, because as we've seen, just people coming in here in my own personal experiences, that there's conflict that's out there in these tools around what's good and what's bad. And you've kind of changed my mind to some degree about the Grammarly platform, and I've been frustrated with it too, but it tends to be very aggressive in going in and changing things, and it has its own kind of um, ideology around like commas and things like that that may or may not, it seems to be pretty aggressive on certain aspects like spaces between like AM and PM, between the numbers and stuff. And I see other people putting the PM and AM against the numbers, and then, but Grammarly wants to separate those two things, and it's very diligent about it. Or a comma before an and, right?
Mhm.
So I
Yeah,
mean,
some of
those
those
are,
things are style choices, and it can be done different ways depending on which style guide you're trying to follow.
yeah,
So,
exactly.
yeah.
So Grammarly had to pick a certain, I guess, writing style guide, like you said, that they're following, that they're imposing on others.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know. How do you think we manage this as we look to the future? I mean, you've said ChatGPT seems to do a pretty good job of this, and these bigger, large language models. Do you see them getting, right on the mark every time, or do you
Mhm.
always
What's
feel
really
some
interesting from
variability?
a language perspective, and what I really one of the things I've been wondering is if these tools will speed up the acceptance of what are traditionally called common errors in English usage. So, they're trained on the wide collection of
Mhm.
content, and a lot of that content comes from the internet and is likely to contain what we call common errors because they're common, right? And
Right.
so, I have noticed it making some of these very small errors, like, what's an example? So, if you say, so you're supposed to say, "There are a couple of things I wanna talk about." That "of" is supposed to be in there, but a lot of people leave it out and say, "There are a couple things we should talk about." That would be considered, sort of a nitpicky common error. And I noticed ChatGPT leaving out the of. And so it was making
Mhm.
this common error. And it made me think of, in the early days, email had a hyphen. And it really, the steam, it got a lot of power behind the idea of losing the hyphen when programs like Yahoo and Gmail Hotmail wrote email in their programs without a hyphen. And
Mhm.
so when these huge tech platforms decided email didn't have a hyphen, pretty soon email doesn't have a hyphen. And so if everybody's
Yeah.
using ChatGPT and ChatGPT always says there are a couple things instead of a couple of things, that's going to change the language. I absolutely believe it will. And so I've been keeping my eye out for those little, tiny little things that it's doing differently from how, a professional editor would say it should be done, and keeping an eye on those, for those places where it will be accelerating language change.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely a changing time when it comes to AI and its impacts on all these different areas of our society and our culture and our work. And it's just having just a devastating impact, I think.
It's
So I
going to
wanted
change
to,
a lot.
oh yeah, and it's going to continue to evolve and change. And I think it's it's gonna get better, but do you think that, uh, it's gonna impose on all of us a certain kind of writing, and it's gonna take the creative element out of it, you think?
I think for business writers, it probably will,
Mhm.
but I'm it's funny because I operate in different worlds, and I can tell you my fiction writing friends, I don't know, they might shiv you if they hear that you're using AI. Like, they're vehemently they hate AI, and you better not say you use it around them. So, so
Especially if you're a screenwriter, right? If you're a
yeah,
screenwriter,
I mean, I
especially,
have
right?
no fear at all that my fiction writing friends are gonna continue to
Yeah.
be creative, and I think at some level, it's making them work harder to be creative, to show their humanity. Um, it's the same thing when I'm writing my AI newsletter, which is different from Grammar Girl.
Mhm.
I find myself trying to sound more human. I'm putting more voice into the writing that I do for that newsletter precisely because I don't want it to feel like it was written by AI. And I know
Mhm.
AI can mimic that voice that I'm trying to put into my newsletter, but out of the
Yeah.
box, it doesn't. So,
Yeah.
it's yeah, it's and I think, it's only gonna get better. I mean, it's sort of cliche at this point to hear like, "Oh, and this is the worst it's ever gonna be," but I think it's likely that's true. I know some people think that it can't get better and then it's stalled. I'm not in that camp. I think it can continue to get better, and I think yeah, I have seen it get better over the, year
Yeah.
and a half I've been following it. So
Yep.
I believe it will continue to get better.
Yeah. Well, let's kind of move to the next stage of the show here, and maybe what we can do is give away the Streamyard mug and Puddles duck, um,
Puddles.
and then after the giveaway, we can go through the 10 or so kind of questions or more significant comments that came from the audience during the program. We didn't really address any of the real deeper questions. So hopefully I do that. But let me pull up the giveaway and we can do the giveaway here. And let's pull it up here. And this tool is available to all StreamYard users. So if you want to give something away on your show, you can utilize this tool. And it works really simply. It's at streamyard.com/giveaway. And if you are logged in and you have a show pending, you can actually just pull up the setup screen for this, and it will capture hashtags that are put into the comment fields of all of the live platforms. So it's really kind of a cool tool. So we've got currently looks like 32 entries. So if you wanted in the last couple minutes here, if you want to put your entry in, it's just hashtag the yard into your comment field in the live viewing application that you're using to watch this show right now. So that's an example of it right there. Uh, Thank you, Mutt Nuts, for your joining of the giveaway. So looks like we had another one come in here, and so as we have those come in, I will hit the draw button, and we will find out who the winner of Puddles the duck and I guess Puddles the mug. So let's go ahead and pull the draw string here. It looks like we've had a couple others come in here. Um, and let's see here. Let's go ahead and hit the button. I think those have been counted. So let's draw the giveaway here. Yay. Ooh, it's exciting. Who's going to win? All right. All,
Woo!
Ollie Cattails. Congratulations. You're the winner of the StreamYard mug and Puddles Duck. Just send me an email to Rob at rob.greenlee@gmail.com, and I'll put it up on the screen here if I can find it in my list of um, files here. Just rob.greenlee@gmail.com. Send me an email with your mailing address and let me know what show you were watching and just say it was with Grammar Girl, and that'll be awesome. Well, thank you everybody for entering the sweepstakes. So let's go ahead and move on and start answering some direct questions from the audience here for the last couple minutes of the show. And see if we can address everyone's questions. So Kayam asked, I have a question, but I'm not sure if Kayam asked the question. So let's see if Kayam posted the question. I don't see it. So I guess we'll have to move on from that one. um, and then okay, these buyouts are always sold okay as a positive, but they rarely work out to be that way. Well, as you think about, I think it's a fair question. I think, and this is in context to StreamYard being acquired by another company, is that a new company has a little different maybe approach to operating the business. So there will oftentimes be some changes, but in the long term, they are wanting the business to succeed and want to serve their customers in the best way they can. So just keep the communication lines going. If you have concerns, certainly voice them to the company and let them know. But I'm I'm optimistic that this will turn out to be a good thing for StreamYard and StreamYard users. So I appreciate your comment though on that. And then let's see here. The next question is, so I remember early 2000s, me and a few friends were going to do a podcast. One of them saw how got a copy of a real encoder. Okay, I'm not sure I totally understand the question. Read this
Oh, there was Real was a company back then. Real, like
right.
maybe Real.
I did use it in the early days of my podcasting, so
Yeah.
maybe that person is talking about the Real Networks or Progressive Networks was the company, back in those days. It was based up in Seattle, where both of us
Right.
are originally from. So I
Yeah.
knew Rob Glazer, the CEO of Real, for many years, but yeah, I mean, I use it a lot because back in the early days of, online media and stuff like that, streaming was the big thing back then because, a lot of users didn't have a lot of bandwidth back then. I'm sure you'll remember, Mignon, in the early days when it's not like we got these big internet pipes like we have now that
Oh, yeah.
deliver content so fast to us. So yeah, that platform was really important to me in the early days of my podcasting and streaming career that I started back in 1999. So, and then Emmanuel writes here, please, I have a question. I can't remember the email I used to create my Facebook profile now because I've been using my profile for about a decade. So I, I don't want to know how I can access your platform without me knowing my email. Okay. Not exactly sure. I think that's more of a question for Facebook. You might want to get in and dig into that a little bit. I'm not sure that has a lot to do with StreamYard, but yeah, I would definitely dig into that. I'm not really sure how to answer that question, but it looks like you need to get access to your account again. But I believe you can get in and set up a direct account with StreamYard without Facebook, unless you're trying to stream to Facebook. So, and then, but thank you, Emmanuel, for that comment. And then also, please enlighten us. This is Gabriel Garcia writes us. Please enlighten us about the possibility of an inclusive version of English in Spanish is a nightmare.
Oh, do you mean like non-gendered language in Spanish? I know there
Ah,
are some movements in countries that do have gendered nouns. I took
okay.
a German in high school, so there's D and der, and the articles are gendered, and
Mhm.
so there are some movements in those countries. But I know what you mean about it being a nightmare because it's so much harder in those languages that have gender more built in than
Mhm.
English does. English, one of the biggest changes I've seen in my time as grammar girl is the acceptance of the singular they. I mean, when I started, 18
Mhm.
or so years ago, all the style guides said not to use it. And now
Mhm.
they all say, go ahead, it's fine. It's been like a much more rapid change than I would have predicted back then. So it can happen. And so I think that it'll be really interesting to see what happens in Spanish and in German and all the other languages that have gendered nouns.
Yeah, and in English too. I mean, if that is gonna happen now. This
Yeah.
next comment, is from, Metal Seer, and I guess I they're displaying up on the screen for those listening to this, they probably can't see this, but and it's pretty small on the screen, but I guess there's a whole slew of new emojis that are catering more to children, I guess, or kids.
Yeah, I'm not
Right.
sure if they're saying, like, only kids should use emoji or these are the new kid, friendly emoji. They're pretty funny. They're making very funny, goofy faces. They kinda remind me of the characters from the movie Monsters.
Yeah. Well, maybe this is another form of language, isn't it? I mean, do each one of these represent a certain amount of, passion and facial expressions
Yeah. You know
and
what's
things?
fascinating is linguists who study emoji equate them more with gestures.
Gesture,
So,
right.
yeah,
Yeah, that
so,
makes
th
sense.
they're because you can't really they're not language in the sense that you can't really put together a string of emoji and have everyone know what you're trying to say. But they
Mhm.
are like gestures in that, if you give someone a thumbs up, like, "Good job," an emoji is kind of like that. I mean, there is the thumbs up emoji, but,
Right.
they convey like, more of a concept or a feeling
Yeah.
than language.
Yeah, that's right. And if you add these to a textual-based communication, it does add a flair to it that, can replace words. I mean, that's how I use it in text messages too, is that it can add to what's being communicated. It's not
Yeah.
gonna take away, but I think you have to be careful which ones that you use because they have different meanings that may be out of context or inappropriate.
They
Might
do,
be.
and, they render
Yeah,
differently on different platforms. I posted something about a
that's true.
month ago maybe showing there was a chart showing how the emoji look different on, an iPhone versus an Android, for example, and they
Oh,
really do look different sometimes. So something that looks happy in one might look more angry in the other, and it was fascinating to me the differences in the you could be trying to convey something and not necessarily succeeding because of the way it looks different on different platforms, so you do need to be kinda careful about that.
do you see yourself digging into emojis as a derivative of grammar, do you think?
I mean, I like talking about them when they're interesting things, but I
If they're
don't I don't
fun.
I don't
Yeah.
think it's like a derivative of it's not gonna I'm not gonna do a whole extra show about it or something. I'm not
Oh, okay,
gonna
okay. Well, fair enough. I just thought I would ask because, as people use these as a replacement for textual content,
Yeah,
uh,
but there's
it's sort of
Emojipedia, like, there's sort of a
Emojipedia, there you
yeah,
go.
there's sort of a dictionary of emoji, so you can go look up any emoji and get, all the information about it from how it looks on different platforms to what its meanings and much like a dictionary.
Yeah, that's awesome, though. I didn't even know that existed, but, well, Metal Seer, thanks for that. It looks like you sent us another, question or comment, here as well. It says, "I let my AI write and text for me, face pink drinking tea face pink drinking tea." I'm not quite sure.
Maybe
I
that's
think
the
that's
emoji?
supposed to be an emoji, but it didn't display, so, so I don't know what platform that you tried to enter that in, but it may not support emojis. So or it didn't pass it to us, one of the 2. I'm not quite sure, if it's an API. It looks like it came out of, YouTube, so
Hmm.
it should have passed it, but I guess it depends on how you inputted it. So anyway, uh, thanks for that, Metal Seer, and then, Dorothy writes of, at Metal Snap Social, "Hello, everyone. This is my first time here. I want to learn about StreamYard for my new podcast." Okay, well, terrific, Dorothy. It's great that you're using StreamYard for your podcast. Some of the new tools that StreamYard now has is the ability to download a mixed version of your local recordings. So, which makes your production process a little easier. Prior to that, you would have to download individual tracks. So let's say you had a guest on, so you would have to download individual tracks for each of your guests. Now there's a version that's combined that you can download. So you can just take that, put it into an editor or encode it or what you might want to do, to get it out as an audio podcast. It's a little easier, but the quality is great versus using the streamed version up in the cloud, which is always an option. That's like your backup plan. So, Dorothy, thanks for the comment and the question there. And then also, Metal Seer writes legal terms using two words meaning the same thing, like cease and desist.
Yes. Yeah,
Those
there
are
are
interesting ones.
yeah, legal language is itself very interesting because it tends to preserve archaic language because it's so formal and so important and it's enshrined in these contracts that get used,
Mhm.
over many, many years. So you'll find a lot of archaic language in or
Mhm.
redundant language in legal contracts sort of by their nature. It's a really fascinating place to find specific types of language like those dual terms, cease and desist. I'm blanking on the other ones, but there's a whole bunch of dual
Yeah.
terms like
Yeah, I
that.
know what you're talking about, right.
Yeah.
And so how does the English language blend in with American English? So there's, different versions of English out there, right? There's the UK version of
Mhm.
English. So do you see a lot of crossover between those 2, and how does that blend together?
Yeah, there's more than there used to be. I think because there's more mixing because of the internet. One of my friends, Lynn Murphy, who is a linguist, wrote one of my favorite books of all time. Um, I, I think it's got to be here somewhere, but close.
It's gotta be on your bookshelf back
It
there
has to
somewhere.
be close by too, because anyway, it's called, Separated by a Common Language, and she is an
Oh,
American linguist who moved to England and works there in a university, and she wrote a whole book about the differences between American and British English. She has a blog too called
mhm.
Separated by a Common Language, and it's just fabulous. I mean, it's just endlessly fascinating, to me, the differences between British and American English and Canadian English and Australian English and Indian English. I mean, there are
Yeah.
many Englishes in the world and they all influence each other now that we, can read each other more and intermix because of the internet. It's fascinating.
Yeah, and will AI, ultimately kind of erase all those distinctions in English, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I do yeah, I wonder. I wonder if you use ChatGPT from a British IP address, if it will answer you in British English. It wouldn't surprise me
Yeah,
if it did.
yeah.
I could imagine them having that.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I haven't thought about that, but it definitely makes sense. When you look at what these big tech platforms are doing, is that they're translating English content into other languages too. Like
Mhm.
this video likely is being streamed to YouTube right now, and it will likely be translated into a couple hundred different languages around the world. So
It's
those that are
amazing. I've
watching
had
this outside of the US will get
I
something
I've seen
different.
a lot of talk about translators losing work to AI. It's one of the industries that's being most heavily affected right now, I
Impacted,
think.
right?
Yeah, and, I've been interested in a real for a really long time about translating the Grammar Girl podcast into Spanish for people who want to learn English, and, we have a lot of shows about idioms, for example, and that would be really useful to people who are trying to learn
Mhm.
English. It's one of the things they struggle with a lot. And I've never found an automated solution that would be good enough to do that to our quality standards. But I will say it's getting a lot closer.
Yeah, yeah. And it
Yeah.
looks like, Metal Seer has another question for us, or somewhat of a comment. Says, somebody wrote a version of the Bible using common American vernacular. So have you
Yeah,
heard
that
about
does
that?
oh, that doesn't surprise me at all. There's all sorts of versions of the Bible in, like, almost every dialect you can imagine. I think the Bible I love some of the history Bible stories. The One of my favorites is there was a misprinting in a very rare Bible now that's hard to find, but, it instead of saying, "Thou shalt not commit adultery," it said, "Thou shalt commit adultery," and
Oh, no.
it's
That
called
has a
this
very different meaning.
a very different meaning. It's called the Sinner's Bible, and,
Oh, boy.
And that it's very rare and very valuable now.
Yeah, it
There are a
sounds like it. Yeah.
couple instances like that where there are misprints or, wrong words that are funny.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, that's definitely a unique, um, kind of change from what you would expect, that's for sure.
Right. Typos have
Well,
been typos have been plaguing people for, as long as you can go back.
yeah. So, it looks like we're getting toward the end here, so I thank everybody for their comments and their questions. There has been a few other comments that have come in, subsequent to us taking those questions. Let me go through those quick and see if we can find anything that is a metal seer. But again, I think legal terms were for people using words um, derived, looks like, from different languages to make sure that people understood, or so I've read.
Yeah,
So,
I actually don't remember. I know that there's a reason, and that very well could be it.
mhm,
I know that when they write the number, like the number, they'll write like the word 10 and they'll put the number 10 in
mhm,
parentheses after it. It's
mhm.
supposedly to keep the contract from being altered, to change the numbers. So if you write it twice, it's harder to sort of, turn a 3 into an 8 or something like that.
Yeah. Well, it looks like Gabriel Garcia wrote here, if you set your OS language in your mobile device into UK English, you get a different response from AI systems. So that
Mm.
answers our question that there is different versions of English that are being put out in AI.
Thank you, Gabriel. That's great to know.
Yeah. So, and then looks like we have another one. I live in Europe and Chat GPT is in American English. Oh,
Huh.
I guess,
Wow.
I mean, based on what Gabriel said, I guess it depends on what your settings of your phone are, right? Are you
Or it
set
could be
to,
phone versus computer.
could be. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I suppose that's a possibility. Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, but it did confirm that there is different flavors of English that are being put out by AI, which
And I'm
makes
sure if
sense.
you told it to reply in British English, it would. Like, you can tell it to reply to you like it's the Star Trek captain or, so I'm sure it can do British English.
Yeah, right, right, yeah. I mean, it would make sense that it would have that capability. Uh, it says, Uncle Fatty writes, George Carlin would have a heyday with today's new vocabulary. And yes, English and Aussie English is different in the chat box. I say I have one AI set up and Socrates, Jesus, and Einstein at a bar. So I'm not quite sure what that is
It sounds like the start
specifically,
of a
but
joke.
yeah, right. Yeah, it does sound like
Socrates, Jesus, and Einstein walk into a bar. What happens next?
right, right, right. Yeah, that's funny. And then, looks like, an emoji. Of course, someone had to share an emoji. So,
A
and a
computer for the
computer, and
AI.
I think we got everybody's, comment in here. It's remarkable. So, if you won the giveaway today, send me an email. I mean, let me just say, anybody can send me an email. So, if you have a comment about the show, I would love to hear from you. So send me an email and your thoughts and topics that you might have for the program coming up in the future here on next Thursday or whatever. I've got another guest coming up, and Mignon, it was terrific to have you with me
You too.
and
Great to see you.
go on this English language journey. I don't consider myself to be an English language expert, so I've learned a lot tonight, and I hope everyone watching this has learned a little bit too. So, and that's why your podcast and your shows are so popular, is because people are interested. So that's
Yeah. Well,
great.
thanks for having me on.
Yeah. Is there anything that you wanted to share about best ways to interact with you, about anything coming up that the audience can connect with to maybe
Yeah, I mean, just
get more from
listen to
you?
listen to the Grammar Girl podcast, wherever you get your
Right.
podcasts, and, I'm excited to share the new interview show with people, so, give it a listen on Tuesdays and Thursdays.
Awesome. Terrific. And this is your YouTube channel too. It's
Mhm.
just at Grammar Girl. It's easy to to remember. So, well, everybody, thank you so much for being with me tonight. It's been a terrific audience, and thank you so much for all the terrific questions. And I'll be back next Thursday with another podcast tips with Rob Greenlee with another terrific guest. So come back and join us again. So thank you so much, and good night, everybody. Thank you.